Assalamualaikum, guys. This is going to be the last question from the 1123 paper one. We will start with the format, then we'll move towards the question, and then I'll explain the process, right? So we're doing O-level English language. Your code is 1123, and your paper is paper one, which is the free paper. Total marks for this paper are 50. Total time for this paper is 2 hours. Section A comes entirely from text A and is for 25 marks. And then section B also comes entirely from text B and is also for 25 marks. So question 3 is a two-part question. It's a two-part question with a summary of text B for 20 marks and then the perspective question for 5 marks. So what we're doing today is the perspective question, right? If you are following the playlist, then I already did the summary right before this. So now we'll just be doing the perspective for 5 marks from text B. This is a question. Imagine you're Brad Bostrom, an outdoor sports expert. You're interviewed by a local news program about the risks involved in kayaking. The interviewer's question is, some local people believe kayaking might be too dangerous for beginners, especially in unpredictable weather conditions. What is your opinion and why? And this is for 5 marks. Well, I can understand people's wariness of the safety hazards that come with water sports like kayaking. There are sundry mechanisms to keep oneself secure. Firstly, flotation devices are a great tool to safeguard yourself in tumultuous weather conditions, especially if you are a beginner. Even without hazardous weather, they lower the risk of drowning. Paddling in groups is another great technique to stay safe. There is strength in numbers and a chance to make new friends too. Checking the weather forecast before heading out does not hurt either. Mild weather conditions or slightly windy are perfect for kayaking in new waters. Lastly, sit-on-top kayaks may also be utilized by beginners into kayaking. So this was the answer that I wrote for this question. Now I'll be breaking it down. So the perspective question, guys, is a question that, and the name I gave it, considering that you answer it from not your own perspective, but somebody else's perspective. So the key with this question is realizing that it's not always going to be the main character or the writer of the insert who you have to write as, right? Now, since it's a perspective question and it's the perspective of a particular person, right? You have to be very clear on how that person would respond to that particular question, right? So, in this case, since Brad Bostrom is an outdoor sports expert, he's going to be answering from an expert's point of view, right? Somebody who's very familiar with outdoor sports, right? And he's being interviewed by a local news program about what? About the risks involved in kayaking, right? And now the interview asks him, some local people believe kayaking might be too dangerous for beginners, especially in unpredictable weather conditions. And then he asks, what is your opinion and why, right? So first of all, if you're an outdoor sports expert, you are clearly not going to go along with the idea of kayaking being a dangerous sport, right? However, you will corroborate your answer with details from the text, right? You will not just write, I believe this, I believe that. Whatever you're writing, it comes directly from the text. So in the text, they had given us certain precautions that we can take to keep ourselves safe while we are kayaking. So let's just go through those. So personal flotation device. Kayakers of all levels should always wear a personal flotation device. Brad advises. Then check the weather forecast before heading out. Investing in a high quality lightweight paddle will make for more efficient movement. This is not a point I added, but it could have been added. You can also give the advice that these boats are much easier to get back in if you flip them over. Right, so these were your points that you could have written to kind of debunk or, you know, calm down the person who's really nervous about trying kayaking for the first time or who thinks it's dangerous, right? Because clearly anything that involves water and going into, an open water is going to come with its risks. You could drown, you could sink, you could get trapped by a thunderstorm. So all of these dangers are present. However, we can minimize them, right? So those were some of the points I picked. Now, how to write this answer? It's a 5-mark question, right? So first of all, they're looking for a response that has explicit ideas from the text. So for example, the ideas that I pointed out, and that are explained further through your own development, right? So you've done your own implicit development to the idea that was already mentioned in the text. The text is your foundation. You add a building block on it of your own development, and then you proceed from there. Right, so clearly Brad Brostrom, being an outdoor sports expert, is going to provide you with certain precautions that you can take that will make it less dangerous for you to start kayaking, right? Especially as a beginner. So these are some of the pointers you can keep in mind when you're writing your answer, that all explicit ideas will come from the text. Please do not add your own answers, ideas, or opinions at this point. After you've picked the ideas from the text, develop them yourself, right? So that is your implicit development. Add as many correct ideas as you can. Keep it within 5 to 6 lines, right? As many correct explicit ideas from the text plus a little bit of implicitness you can add, the better. Keep it within 5 to 6 lines, though add evaluations or development wherever possible. Answer from Brad Bostrom's perspective, i.e. first person perspective. So because he is saying it, he'll be saying it like I think this, I. So what I usually tell my students is that three explicit ideas plus proper development will make for an excellent response. 3 to 4 explicit ideas, if you can write 4 and fit it in, it's great, right? Or you can go with 3 explicit ideas and proper development, plus 1 or 2 points that are not developed. They're just there. That also works, right? Because you do have a certain number of lines that you have to fit your answer within. Now we'll read it again and we'll see how we've incorporated this. While I can understand people's wariness of the safety hazards that come with water sports like kayaking, there are sundry mechanisms to keep oneself secure. Right? So he acknowledges that people's safety hazards are not based in ignorance, they are valid. He validates that. And then he says, there are many mechanisms to keep yourself secure. So sundry means various. Firstly, flotation devices are a great tool to safeguard yourself in tumultuous weather conditions. And now this is development, especially if you're a beginner. Even without hazardous weather, they lower the risk of drowning. So this is all implicit development, right? It wasn't really in the text, something that I added on my own. Paddling in groups is another great technique to stay safe. Now, this was in the passage. There is strength in numbers and a chance to make new friends too. So this was my implicit development. And this was the point from the passage. Checking the weather forecast before heading out does not hurt either. So this is again an explicit point from the text. And this is implicit development. Mild weather conditions or slightly windy are perfect for kayaking in new water. So he's an expert, he's giving his own opinion. Lastly, sit on top kayaks may also be utilized by beginners to ease into kayaking. This is all entirely from the text, and there is some implicit development that's fine, right? Now, I will just reiterate that you are to write from this person's perspective, right? They could also have given you a question like, you are a survivor of a kayaking incident. Do you think kayaking is a safe sport. In that case, the perspective would be completely different, right? So you would be using the same points, but in the opposite directions. That weather conditions are unpredictable. It is unsafe for beginners, right? And obviously, they would have given you in the more points in the text to write for a question like that. But I just gave that example to show you guys that the perspective really just depends on who is speaking, on who is answering the question, right? So for another example I could give of this is, for example, if beef burger restaurant opens, right, and the text is about that, but you are a vegetarian and they ask you as a vegetarian if what you think of the restaurant and what you think of this endeavor, right? So your perspective is going to be completely different from somebody who actually is who eats meat, somebody who eats meat, right? You will probably be very against the idea of a beef burger restaurant as a vegetarian, right? So that was just an example to show you how it can be the same insert, but the perspective of one person can be completely different from the perspective of another. So just make sure that you are not answering with your own opinions, with your own personal ideas, but the ideas of the text. And that will be it for the perspective.